Okay, I'll let the attendees in now.
Good evening, everyone. We will begin this session shortly. Please allow me to go over some of the house rules and SOPs for tonight's session. First, kindly keep your microphones muted when you aren't speaking to avoid any unwanted disturbances. Second, kindly use the raise hand function when you'd like to speak during the guided discussion so that our moderator can call on you. And lastly, please feel free to leave your questions in the chat box so that our team can prepare for tonight's guided discussion. We'd also love it if you could stay to the end, as your evaluation form will be necessary to claim your e-certificate after the session. Thank you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to turn over the virtual stage to Ms. Emma Dakigan, Project Associate and Regional Fellow for the Zero Hunger Lab, as well as Executive Director of Luke Foundation, who will be tonight's moderator. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Miss Wina. And welcome to tonight's installment of the Zero Hunger Lab Summer Institute 2021. One of Zero Hunger Lab's partners in reaching out to LGUs and expanding its horizons is Galing Pook Foundation. So here to give tonight's opening remarks is Miss Georgina Hernandez Yang, the Executive Director of Galing Pook Foundation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Emma, and thank you, Wina. And I would like to welcome everyone to our late night session, session 6, Food Security and Climate Change, as part of the Zero Hunger Lab um, fellowship program. I actually want to thank and congratulate all of you for being here at 7:45 p.m. Someone wanted to call me. I said I'm still in a program and I'm going to give the opening remarks, and I was asked, what time zone is that? Akala nila nasa ibang time zone tayo. But that really just shows the commitment of everyone, all 56 of us, to really talk about our topic for tonight on food security and climate change. Very, very important topic, very timely as well. We are still in the a situation, we are still in the COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of disruptions on food security, access to nutritious food, access to affordable food has been experienced in the past year because of the many lockdowns. But even before the pandemic, the issue of food security, malnutrition, stunting has been a huge problem in the Philippines. There's really data that's showing regarding the alarming situation of stunting in the Philippines, and mainly because of the poverty situation, because of the difficulty to access nutritious and affordable food. And hopefully our discussion this evening will be lively, will be informative, but also will be transformative with the situation that we have at hand, where we need to be innovative and we need to find sustainable solutions to all of these challenges that we are all experiencing at the same time. And so this type of an approach, a lab type of an approach where we hopefully can be very interactive, will address and reach what we envision in Galing Po Foundation as the 3S. In Galing Po Foundation, we work with local government units to establish safe, smart, and sustainable cities. Safe cities that where people have access to universal healthcare and other social services, so that we are also able to maintain peace and order and peace and development in communities. Smart with the use of data, evidence, and technology, so that we can address issues and create policies that are data driven and evidence based, and sustainable, so that with the situation of man-made and natural disasters, as well as with climate change, we are resilient. We are able to create adaptable solutions. So disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation is a huge aspect when we talk about sustainable communities. So I'm very excited and happy to be a part of this session tonight, and also happy to know and to be good friends with our panelists. So you are in good hands tonight, and I hope we all enjoy and learn and get also what we came here for. Maraming salamat po at magandang gabi sa lahat.
Thank you, Miss Georgina, for your warm welcome remarks. And thank you for joining us again for this session. We had one session earlier for those who were not able to join. Okay, so now this is an excellent way to jump into our program. So it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's first speaker, Dr. Renzo Ginto from St. Luke's Medical Center, College of Medicine in the Philippines, who will be talking to us about the intersections between health and sustainability. Dr. Renzo Ginto is a medical doctor and a doctor in public health, and is also an associate professor of the practice of global public health and inaugural director of the Planetary and Global Health Program of the St. Luke's Medical Center College of Medicine in the Philippines. He is also chief planetary doctor of L.A.H.A.T. It is a global think and do tank for advancing the health of both people and the planet. An Obama Foundation Asia Pacific leader and Aspen Institute New Voices Fellow, Dr. Renzo is member of several high-level international groups, including Lancet Chatham House Commission on Improving Population Health Post-COVID-19 at the University of Cambridge, Lancet One Health Commission at the University of Oslo, Advisory Board of Climate Cares at the Imperial College London, and Editorial Advisory Board of the Lancet Planetary Health. He has served as consultant for various organizations, including World Health Organization, World Bank, USAID, ASEAN, International Organization for Migration, Healthcare Without Harm, and Philippine Department of Health. Dr. Renzo obtained his Doctor of Public Health from Harvard University and Doctor of Medicine from the University of the Philippines, Manila. In 2020, he was included by Tatler magazine in its general T list of 400 leaders of tomorrow who are shaping Asia's future. Dr. Renzo has traveled to and lectured in nearly 50 countries, published more than 100 articles in scientific journals, books, and popular media, and directed and produced short films that communicate the message of planetary healing to the world. Are you excited that he's now with us and he will be sharing all learnings to us? Okay, so let's give a hand to Dr. Renzo.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that very generous introduction. Thank you to organizers for having me tonight. Of course, special thanks to Georgina for, again, that warm welcome, and who's a very good friend of mine. Thank you again, no? And I know it's dinner time. I'm also fasting myself, at least for the next hour, so that I can talk about food, no? Which is quite interesting and ironic. We're talking about food, but I'm currently hungry, but that is fine, because I think we have really big challenges to address, and I hope that I'll be able to breeze you through some of these challenges, and hopefully we'll use this opportunity to come up with solutions, because as mentioned a while ago, this is a lab. So for the next several minutes, I'll be talking about, food systems in the era of climate change and planetary health. So first, I want to define what planetary health is. You might be wondering, what is this term, no? Maybe this is the first time you're hearing this concept. Maybe you're familiar with the term public health, especially in this time of COVID-19. Public health has been in the news. We've been hearing it all the time. Public health is about improving the health of people, of populations. Unfortunately, when we talk about public health, we usually not always think about the planet's health, right? We put food on the table to improve our global nutrition, the nutrition of our nutritional status of our children, of our families, without really thinking about how does this connect to the health of the planet. uh, we talk about improving the condition of our cities, no, urbanization, which improve access to a lot of opportunities. But again, we usually think about these issues without necessarily thinking about the health of the planet. And so planetary health is this expansion of public health. And when we say planetary health, we now have two patients, no? And as a physician, I always say I have two patients: people and planet. And I think you don't need to be a physician to be caring for people and caring for planet as well. I want to hear from you maybe later on your backgrounds. What are your organizations and the disciplines that you're representing? And so this is the way I visualize it. We have two patients who are wearing masks, people wearing masks to protect themselves from the coronavirus. And Mother Earth herself is wearing a mask to protect herself from the many environmental impacts that we're generating as part of our human activities. And the way I simplify planetary health is this. Planetary health ay ang agham ng lahat. Okay? And lahat is an acronym for L, lupa, A, araw, H, hangin at hayop, A, ako, T, tubig at tao. Lahat ay magkaugnay, sabi nga ni Joey Ayala. So I think this is a very easy to remember mnemonic or acronym. Pag tinanong kayo what is planetary health, sabihin nyo, yan ay agham ng lahat. Lahat ay dapat nating pagbigyan ng pansin at pahalagahan. And I already mentioned a while ago, many of the changes are generated by our human activities. That is what you mean, or what we mean by the term anthropogenic change. Anthropo, humans. So human-induced change. And what are these human-induced changes that we've been seeing? As you can see on your left, consumption patterns, no? The way we eat, the way we purchase, the way we produce, demographic shifts, urbanization, people are going to cities, migration, people are going to other places, whether within the country or in other parts of the world. Aging is another form of demographic shift, but also the growing population and the youth bulge, no? Mas marami ngayon ang kabataan. At technology, no? Technological advancement, no? Where I guess some of you are, looking forward to the next iPhone model or the next gadget, and that's part of this technological advancement and rapid advancement that we've been seeing in society for many years already. Unfortunately, all these changes or these drivers are creating these environmental problems, no? Pollution of the air, water, soil, the loss of biodiversity, climate change, which we will be talking more about in a bit. And all of these, I'll not go into the details of this diagram, lead to a wide range of health impacts. So look at the words on the right, no? Malnutrition, and we'll be talking more about it in this session because our lab is about food. Infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cancers, displacement and conflict. When there's resource scarcity, people are fighting over either food or water or land. And then of course, mental health. There's growing evidence that these environmental issues, catastrophes that we're seeing are creating a new epidemic of loneliness, of stress, etc. And when we talk about the planet's health, there's so many frameworks, one of which is this Planetary Boundaries framework. And basically what this framework is saying is that there are 9 boundaries, okay? And unfortunately, out of the 9, 2 out of the 9 are already violated or breached. They're the ones in red. Biosphere integrity, because over the past century, we've seen the fastest rate of extinction of creatures great and small. And then the other boundary that has already been breached is the natural biogeochemical flows of P and N. So usually in the classroom, I ask students, what is P and what is N in the periodic table of elements? Phosphorus and nitrogen. And usually I ask, what do you think is the human activity that resulted in the disruption of these, the biogeochemical cycles of these two elements? It's our addiction to artificial fertilizers, for instance. We've been pumping phosphorus and nitrogen into the soil, which disrupts the whole cycle. And so 2 out of 9 already violated. 2 out of 9 are soon to be violated. They're the ones in yellow. Climate change, which we will be talking a bit about in a bit, and land system change. What is land system change? We've been turning every natural habitat or natural, ecosystem, the natural land, into cities, into subdivisions, into golf courses, into palm oil plantations, into mining areas, and that is really disrupting again the naturalness of nature, which is vital for the longer sustainability of the planet. So 2 out of 9 breached, 2 out of 9 soon to be breached. Is the planet still going to be inhabitable for us, for human civilization, and for the future children of the Philippines and the world? So I mentioned already climate change is one of the boundaries. And we know that the climate crisis is continuing to unfold, and we know that it resulted in our greenhouse gas emissions. And these are the main sources of greenhouse gases, no? Energy systems, no? We've been burning fossil fuels, coal, petroleum, emitting these carbon and other greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, or agricultural practices. The burning of again, land use change, the burning of forest systems to turn them into agricultural lands. Even waste disposal also contributes to emissions. So all of these are leading to the emissions of greenhouse gases, which then destabilizes the climate, okay, and makes it even warmer. No, we've heard of global warming, but the global warming is not anymore natural. It's anthropogenic because of these activities. And so when climate change continues to exacerbate or to worsen, these are just some of the anticipated impacts of climate change. No, sea level rise, continuous increase in temperature, not disasters, hazards like typhoons and flooding and other extreme weather events, depletion of water resources, etc. So that is just a quick intro about the planet's health. And now we'll zoom into the Philippines, which I always say is at the heart of planetary health. And yes, we're at the heart because we're really affected by many of these issues. I think we should be also at the heart of planetary health solutions. And so I really hope that this cohort that we have in Zoom will come up with the solutions that will make us address these challenges that I mentioned. So, but we're at the heart because, as you can see in this map, this is Southeast Asia. And in this map, the redder the country is, the more vulnerable the country is to climate change. And so unfortunately, look at which country is the reddest of them all. It's the Philippines, our beloved home. So we are really one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. And of course, we know how, extreme weather events impact, our society, our livelihood, our infrastructure, educational systems, and of course, the food systems. And then it creates a lot of health issues as well, even disease, disability, and death. And of course, this is quite unique in the Philippine experience. Last year, we've seen our people, especially the poor and the marginalized, face this dilemma, no? during a pandemic, there's also climate crisis. On one hand, do I stay in the house, protect myself from COVID, but at the same time, maybe my house might get inundated by the intense flooding, or the roof might be blown away by the strong wind. On the other hand, I can move to this cramped evacuation center, these temporary shelters, and I'll be safe from storm and flooding. But there's a high chance that I will get the unseen coronavirus because, as you can see in this picture, there's no social distancing to begin with. And so the Philippines really experienced the convergence of this dual crisis of climate change and COVID-19. But there are other manifestations of climate change in a country like the Philippines. So for example, uh, there's evidence that we are facing some of the fastest rate of sea level rise in the world. And when the ice caps melt in the Arctic pole, the level of the water increases, and that leads to sea water intrusion. No, pumapasok yung water from the sea all the way to the land, and when that happens, no, the fresh water becomes high in salt, salinized, no, and which can lead to a wide range of health impacts as well. And then of course, it's not just your water that gets salinized or high in salt, but also it can also displace communities and also affect farmlands. No, when the farmland is contaminated with water high in salt, that can lead to declines in harvest. So for example, in rice harvest. And on the other hand, so the effects in the Philippines is twofold. One is too much water, or on the other hand, very little water. And that means too much heat, right? Very high temperature. And so, you can see these are already realities in some of our, rural areas in the Philippines, yung tagtuyot, no? And that will also endanger the food security of the country, and also it will endanger the livelihoods and the well-being of our farmers, who are unfortunately the poorest, some of the poorest segments of our society. Imagine your farmers who are feeding you are also hungry, no? Because they cannot access the food themselves. And so this diagram shows to you how climate change is going to affect the health of people. And two things that you should remember. One, there are many pathways that connect climate change to human health. There's several arrows, there's several boxes. It can be through storms or bagyo, drought, tagtuyot, flooding, baha, or heat wave, yung matinding init, no? And all these will affect health, as I've said, in many different ways. And on your right, you will see that there's really no single disease group that is immune or going to be immune to climate change. As I already mentioned a while ago, every health aspect will be affected, not just the physical, but also the mental as well. And of course, it will affect the nutritional status of the country. And a while ago, Georgina already mentioned stunting is a real problem in the country. 3 out of 10 kids under 5 are stunted. 9.2% of adolescents, on the other hand, are overweight and obese. So that's interesting because our fellow Filipinos, especially the children, are either undernourished or overnourished. And that is what you call the double burden of malnutrition, the two types of malnutrition. 28.8% of adults are overweight, and 25% of pregnant mothers are nutritionally at risk. And we know that the nutrition of mothers is so critical, so that the nutrition, so for the health of their infants, no, of their children. So the health of our children is already shaped even while they're still in the womb, no? Nasa sinapupunan pa lamang. So yung intergenerational aspect of nutrition is also important to recognize. So if we are not going to address climate change, this is what's going to happen, no? I know we're all afraid of the first wave, the second wave of COVID, the third wave of COVID, but we should also be afraid, if not more afraid, of the not waves, but tsunamis of climate change and their health and its health related consequences. So these are some illustrations showing to you again, not just the wave, but the tsunami of climate related health impacts. So the question now is, are we ready to build food systems that consider the climate? Okay? When for example, for those who are having dinner now, did you even think about the climate when you were thinking about what to purchase, what to prepare, what to serve to your respective families? That's at the level of the household. But at the level of the food system, whether it's at the community level, at the provincial level, or at the national level, are we considering or taking into account the climate as we make decisions and design the systems that will feed us for years and decades to come? So of course, and I believe you have a session on something related to disasters. Of course, maybe the first answer that you have in mind is yes, we need to be ready to feed people who are affected by extreme weather events, by disasters like typhoons and intense flooding. And our country has some programs for emergency nutrition, and I will not go into detail. These are from the National Nutrition Council of the Department of Health. Uh, but we need to go beyond responding to food needs in the disaster context. Of course, we need to have steady supply, ready supply, contingency plans. We need to have the nutritional workers who will really provide these food services when disasters strike. But we need to go beyond. And how do we go beyond? So for instance, another area is we need to think about the crops that we are planting. And I'm just giving rice as an example, but for sure there's so many other vegetables and crops that we can think of that we need to climate proof and to disaster proof. So for instance, the International Rice Research Institute, which is based in UP Los Baños, as well as PhilRice, have been doing a lot of research on climate resilient varieties of rice, no? So that we can help our farmers cope with climate change, and we can ensure that there's rice to be put on the table of Filipino families in a world of a changing climate. So what are these varieties? Drought tolerant, submergence tolerant kapag binaha, cold tolerant pag naman matindi ang lamig, no? In some parts naman yun ang effect. But also salt tolerant, as I mentioned, sea level rise will increase the salinity of irrigation systems. Of course, not just in the crop per se, but we need to think of climate resilient agricultural technologies and approaches. So this is a very interesting compendium. You can Google it and you will see around, I think, 100 technologies that will help our farmers to cope with the changing climate. What I'm amazed about the Philippines, and while I painted you perhaps a very scary picture, I think there's hope, and I think there's hope, especially in our young people, in the social entrepreneurs who are thinking and acting locally, training farmers, building capacity, equipping them with the necessary knowledge and tools, and really promoting small scale agriculture. Because when disasters strike, or when there's even a crisis like COVID-19 and your food supply has been disrupted, at least you have local options. And in fact, naturally grown, organically grown, and homegrown vegetables and other crops are also healthier and also good for the planet. And so we should be promoting these approaches even more. And of course, maybe, you've been thinking only of food in terms of what we are planting on the soil. But let's remember, we are an archipelago of more than 7,000 islands. We're surrounded by a lot of water. And water, the sea, the ocean is going to be affected by climate change as well. You might have heard of coral bleaching, which is the whitening and the hardening of the corals because of the increasing temperature of the waters. And we know that the coral reefs are the forests and the ocean. They're the habitats for fingerlings, no, the baby fish. And so we need to protect our oceans as well in order to ensure that we still have fish and other seafood products to enjoy in the years and decades to come. And we will also be able to help our fisher folks as well. So we need to mitigate the impacts of climate change on the fisheries. So I talk about how can we adapt to climate change? How can we redesign the food system so that we are climate ready and resilient? But the other challenge is that our food systems are also contributing to the climate crisis. How? So there's this report that was published in 2019. It describes a global syndemic of obesity, undernutrition, and climate change. You've heard of the term pandemic. Pandemic means a disease that affects the whole world. But syndemics are multiple epidemics happening at the same time, and they're interacting with one another. And so what is the situation now? We have a syndemic of obesity. As I've said, there are people who are overweight and obese. Globally, there are 2 billion people who are overweight or obese. On the other hand, you have 1 billion people who are undernourished. Okay? So imagine those two problems are happening at the same time. And then the same food system that created those two problems are also contributing to the climate crisis, because the food systems are emitting a lot of carbon and overusing water, soil, and energy resources. So that is how, what you mean by syndemic. Multiple problems happening, and there is the same driver, a singular driver, which is the food system. So we need to change the food system. That's the simplest answer. We can't keep on giving nutritional supplements to people. We need to fix the root cause, and that is the food system. So some information, around 15% of the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from the livestock and meat industry. So we need to really transform the way we consume, for instance, meat. And we know that meat consumption, in particular red meat and processed meat, have already been declared by the World Health Organization as a carcinogen. It causes cancer in the long run. And so we really need to reduce meat consumption, not just because of the climate, but because of our own health as well. Okay? And there is another problem related to the meat industry, and that is antimicrobial resistance. Okay? Let me explain this a bit. When you say there's antimicrobial resistance, your antibiotics are not anymore working, because the bacteria and the other pathogens, the microbes, are already resistant to these antibiotics. So what will happen in the future is that if you need to get operated on by the surgeon because of your tumor, the surgeon will rather not operate on you, because you will die faster of infection rather than the tumor. Because remember, we need to give you antibiotics before we operate on you. Okay? And then when you get an infection, we also provide you antibiotics. So that is going to be a global crisis. And the reason is because we've been misusing antibiotics a lot. Not just in human medicine. I know some people might be familiar with, when you feel feverish, you just get your antibiotic, and you self-medicate yourself. But good thing we have policies put in place so that you cannot buy antibiotics immediately from Mercury Drug, right? But now, the major cause of antimicrobial resistance is the misuse of antibiotics in the meat industry, because we've been pumping antibiotics into chickens, pigs, and cattle, okay, as if they're vitamins. And then when you consume your meat filled with antibiotics, so it enters also your system. So these are just some of the issues that are also related to the meat issue. And that's why I always say reduction of meat is a quadruple win. It's a planetary health solution. It will decrease non-communicable diseases like cancer. It will reduce carbon emissions, which contribute to climate change. It will lower the risk of antimicrobial resistance, and it will prevent another COVID-19, because we know that these viruses are living in the animals that we eat. And that is why there's a suggestion called the Planetary Health Diet. So, if you're interested, I invite you to Google about it. I'll try to share some links later on. And the Planetary Health Diet is a diet that is good for the planet and good for the people's health. Okay? And as you can see in this plate, half of the plate is comprised of vegetables and fruits and greens, and only a very small portion is comprised of red meat. And in fact, if you translate this into a week-long diet, that means you will only eat meat during one meal for an entire week. So maybe it's Sunday night, it's the Sunday dinner or Sunday lunch. But the rest of the week, you don't eat meat. And the challenge is, are we Filipinos ready for this kind of diet? Because, we love some gipsal and we love, our adobo and so on and so forth. And lechon, of course. Excitingly, there is an initiative now of the National Academy of Science and Technology to envision how to implement and realize the planetary health diet in Metro Manila. So, I'm excited about this, and hopefully even our lab can contribute to realizing this vision. So I'm reaching the end of my talk, and I want to give some core messages. First, I know this is a familiar graph, right? You've seen this in social media so many times. We need to flatten the curve of COVID-19, and we need to increase the capacity of the healthcare system. We need to add more beds. We need to recruit more nurses. We need to vaccinate many people. And so if you're not yet vaccinated, please do so, because we want to make sure we reach herd immunity as soon as possible. But I think that the flatten the curve message is also applicable for the climate crisis that we're seeing. We need to flatten the curve of our carbon emissions and our ecological footprint. But the main difference between the earlier curve and this curve is that the Earth's capacity is constant. It's unchangeable, and therefore it's non-negotiable. Hindi po natin siya pwedeng lagyan ng maraming kama or mag-recruit ng nurses para tumaas yung Earth's capacity. It's constant. Remember, we have the planetary boundaries, and we cannot violate the boundaries. Of course, we want to recover after COVID. And we want the post-COVID recovery to be green, healthy, and just. Okay? We need to go to the new normal that is the true normal. Because the old normal is actually not normal. It's abnormal. Okay? It's abnormal that we are emitting greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. It's abnormal that there are 2 billion people who are obese and 1 billion people who are undernourished, right? So the new normal should be a system where we do not pollute our planet, but we feed everyone equitably, and that people are living healthy lives. That should be the agenda for our recovery. So I invite you to join Planetary Health Philippines. Please visit planetaryhealth.ph. I will share the link as well later in the chat box. And also, we want everyone to be part of the planetary health movement. We only have one planet, and we only have our own health as well. So, but we also need to think about the future generations. We have a responsibility to these children and to the children that are yet to come. We need to make sure that we are leaving to them a planet which can provide them nutrition and good health in the years, decades, and centuries to come. So together, let's advance the health of people and planet through food. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our conversation later.
Thank you, Dr. Renzo, for making us understand that in safeguarding our health, we also have to take care of the planetary health. That was very informative. So, to our audience, are you ready for this planetary diet limiting our consumption of meat? Okay, so that's a question I'm leaving to everyone. Okay, so before we move on to our next speaker, I'd like to remind everyone to leave your questions for Dr. Renzo in the comment section. And also, if you have questions while our next speaker is sharing, you may also type on the chat box so we can consolidate it for our guided discussion later in tonight's program. Now, allow me to introduce tonight's second speaker, Dr. Glenn Banaguas, founder of the Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute. Dr. Glenn Banaguas is a multi-awarded prolific scientist and diplomat, and one of the leading experts on environment, climate change, and disaster risks in Asia. He analyzes conundrums brought by climate change and extreme events using scientific models, data, and spatial statistics, applies participatory mechanisms, recommends ESG and science based policy solutions, and provides resilient and sustainable programs. He is the honoree of the Outstanding Filipino Award for Environment Conservation and Science Diplomacy. Recipient of the National Academy of Science and Technology Outstanding Young Scientist for Environmental Management. Grantee of the Royal Society, the World Academy of Sciences, and Environmental Defense Fund for Climate Engineering. Asia's Sustainability Leader Award, Men and Women of Science, Outstanding Agro-Fishery Gold Award, and CSEC's Outstanding Leadership Award. He was recognized in GWP Water Changemaker, ASEAN Champions for Biodiversity, Environmental Hero Award, ASEAN Risk Awards, and nominated in Liaison Global Leadership Awards and Harvard's Roy Family Award for Environmental Partnership. He is also part of the team that won the Rockefeller Foundation Food System Vision Prize Special Mention Award. Okay, so even if we missed dinner, can you imagine our speakers tonight are giving us a lot of food for our brains? So may I welcome Dr. Glenn Banaguas.
I'm having a hard time to share my screen. All right, can you hear me?
Yes, Bob.
Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Good morning to the other, good morning to other countries. Okay, again, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Elmer Soriano of Civica, of course. And I know that this is in partnership with Yellowstone University, Manila, and other stakeholders. So anyway, my presentation is all about really for the Philippines. It's called Climate Smart Philippines Science for Service. So climate change has been deemed to be an environmental pandemonium that has costed political, economic, social, and human systems. It has created a daunting challenge and dismal innovation to humanity. However, its catastrophic impacts and risks have been staved off either by adaptation solutions or mitigation approaches conducted by different institutions, agencies, and centers. Climate Smart Philippines is the flagship program of the Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute, which I founded in 2010. It's a platform that provides elucidations in reducing disaster risk and preventing potential damage and losses through scientific wide-ranging assessment, capacity development, project management, and multilateral cooperation among actors. It is an avenue for all the stakeholders to understand, plan, develop, and implement not only the best science and evidence-based strategic solutions, but also the most humane and gender-responsive schemes. It is also a stratagem designed to bring out the best in every individual to solve the most pressing conundrum regardless of culture, gender, and status in life. And it is also a bridge that influences and impacts public policy, which deals with matters of fretfulness, peevishness, and sensitivity. But what is Climate Smart Philippines? And how is it different from any other efforts, initiatives being done by the different institutions? Climate Smart Philippines applies the power of multi-stakeholder participatory mechanisms. It applies assessment, it has assessment, process, planning, and implementation, which are based on collaboration and cooperation in an inclusive mode. Though there is great diversity that exists, the spectrum of solutions that benefits the large segment in the society prevails. Some of the outcomes are more informed participatory and integrated governance and management at all levels, increased public and private sector investment in required infrastructure, services, technologies, and innovations to support the sustainable management of countries' resources, planning practices, and implementation capacity in order to address complex interaction and trade-offs among the utilization of resources. And of course, the improved management capability of the three major islands of the Philippines. Climate Smart Philippines is also science and evidence-based. All stakeholders, may it be government, institutions, provincial and local government units, academe, civil society organizations, NGOs, people's organization of farmers, fishermen, indigenous people, private sector, are all empowered using credible sources of evidence, which are based on multiple lines of specific scientific research and education. In addition, there is a substantial array of scientific substantiation and growing body of knowledge about technologies, innovation, and even policies that are taught and recommended to the actors in order to slacken the magnitude of climate change. Another interesting characteristic of Climate Smart Philippines, it is considered to be people-centered. It has strong focus on tackling the innumerable roots of impacts and risks of climate change to make sure that there is actual convalescence in the quality of life of the populace today and in coming decade. The stakeholders are trained in the development and implementation processes to ensure resiliency and sustainability. For instance, fostering resilience of the production landscapes of food and water, nutrition and livelihood security of the farmers, fishermen, IPs, women, youth, persons with disabilities or PWDs, and local communities must be one of the top of priorities. So,
Excuse me,
yes,
sir.
yes,
The presentation
sorry,
is not moving po.
is it not moving?
The
Sorry.
slideshow po, it's not moving.
Ah,
Sorry.
it's
Yes po.
okay. All right, thank you very much. So that is all
Okay,
about
there. Thank you,
Climate
sir.
Smart Philippines. Yeah. So in this particular program, Climate Smart Philippines, it covers 81 provinces, 146 cities, 1,488 municipalities, and 42,046 barangays. Now, if we talk about Climate Smart Philippines, what does it really mean? So like what I mentioned a while ago, it has mitigation, it has adaptation. So the other people would say, Glenn, why you're not using climate resilience? I said, I cannot use climate resilience because you're only referring to adaptation. But if you call it smart, you are focusing on two particular aspects. It's either mitigation wherein you are trying to reduce your GHGs in the form of carbon dioxide equivalents. And the other one is climate adaptation wherein you assess and manage the risk. And Climate Smart Philippines is about a trip to resiliency and sustainability, which I'm going to provide you later on. So why TRIP? TRIP stands for Track Risk Impact Policy Framework. T stands for track assessment, R stands for risk assessment, I stands for impact assessment, and P stands for policy. So What is track assessment? Tracks, whenever we talk about, whenever we roll out and whenever we travel to different parts of the country, these are the things that we provide. All right, track assessment. We want to know the human resources and demographics of that particular area, maybe a province, city, or municipality. We also need to understand the historical analysis of that particular province. What happened there before? What is happening right now? And what is going to happen in the future? So we use different climate models, all right? Because I'm a climatologist, I'm a climate scientist. So it is very important for all of us to use different GCMs or global climate models that will help us to understand what is going to happen in the future. So climate scenarios and projections in terms of rainfall and temperature. What happened before? What is happening right now? And what is going to happen in the future for the year 2050, for the year 2080, and for the year 2100? So are you going to experience an increasing amount of rainfall? Are you going to experience increasing amount of temperature? So these are the climate scenarios that we are considering. Next, aside from that, we also need to assess what is really happening there. It is very important to know your risks as a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Since that this is Climate Smart Philippines, we are considering different types of hazards. Hazards such as your flooding, your sea level rise, your tropical cyclones, your drought. Now your exposure, if the exposure is in terms of people, maybe a population, sing individual or household, there is a corresponding vulnerability parameter or vulnerability index that we use, and that is your poverty incidence, and the other one is your HDI or the Human Development Index, wherein under HDI you have to consider age, education, income. Why age? Who are vulnerable? Who are more vulnerable to different types of climate hazards? The people who are young or the people who are old? And in terms of education, who are again more vulnerable? The people who have education or the people who don't have any education at all? In terms of income, who are again more vulnerable? The people who are rich or the people who are poor? Now, that is if the exposure is in terms of population. Now, what if the exposure is in terms of infrastructures, your assets, agricultural assets, your fishery? What is your vulnerability parameter? The vulnerability parameter or indicator that we use is your GDP or gross domestic product in terms of damages and losses. And that's how we assess the risk. You have your hazard, you have your exposure, you have your vulnerability, and then definitely you will be able to assess your risk properly. Now, so this is an example, all right? These particular maps, okay? You have your hazard, you have your exposure and vulnerability. Now, the redder the color, it means that more tropical cyclones are entered in the Philippine Air Responsibility and made their landfall in those areas. So again, the redder the color, more tropical cyclones enter the PAR and they made their landfall on that particular spot. Exposure, the bluer the color, it means more populated, there are more population, the population is increasing in that particular area. So if it is green, expect that the population is not that big, but if it is blue, expect that the population is increasing. Now, in terms of vulnerability, we use the HDI or the Human Development Index. Now, we found out that the lowest Human Development Index or HDI is recorded in the area of Mindanao. So if you have hazard, exposure, and vulnerability, put them all together, all right? You can do different types of simulations or different types of modeling, then you will be able to assess the risk. So aside from, it's not enough to understand your hazard. It's not enough to understand your exposure. It's not enough to understand the risk assessment. And of course, to understand what is going to happen in the future. We should know and we should understand what is going to happen in that particular area. What are the possible impacts? I call it GSB because that stands for my name, Glenn S. Banaguas, Modified Impact Chain Assessment or MICA. Now, this is being used by the LTFRB, by HLURB, I'm sorry, and it is now being replicated in different parts of the country. However, they're only using the biophysical assessment and socioeconomic assessment, but they are not considering the psychological and religiosity. So let me discuss this very briefly. So impact assessment, the Philippines, the region where you are, the province, and then the municipality. Then climate stimulus, these are your climate stimuli. Is your province or is your municipality or city experiencing increasing amount of rainfall? Is it increasing amount of temperature? So these are the different climate variables or stimuli that are happening in your province. Now, you also want to understand exposure and sensitivity. Who are exposed in that particular area, who are exposed in different types of hazards, and how sensitive, what's the level of sensitivity. For example, if you have two infrastructures, two houses, one it's a nipa hut, and the other one is, well, it's a building. Now, what do you mean by exposure? What do you mean by sensitivity? How are you going to explain exposure and sensitivity if you have two particular infrastructures? Who is exposed? And of course, what is the level of sensitivity? Now, to explain this further, if you have two, infrastructures, so both of them are exposed to hazards, for instance, for flooding. And then in terms of sensitivity, the one building, or the nipa hut, or the house, which is a nipa hut, is more sensitive compared to the one with a very good infrastructure. So in terms of sensitivity, the one with the light material is more sensitive than the other one, and that's how we measure exposure and sensitivity. Now, after determining the exposure and sensitivity, may it be people, or may they be people, or may it be an infrastructure, then we move on to the biophysical assessment and identify of course, the differences that happened before and what is happening right now. For example, um, how often do you experience flood in your area? So you're going to ask your different stakeholders. For example, you're asking the farmers, you're asking the fisher folks, how often do you experience flood? How often do you experience tropical cyclones? Now, for the socioeconomic assessment, when this particular hazard enters in your area and made its landfall, in terms of socioeconomic assessment, what was the yield, right? You're going to compare the yield, and that's an example. What was the yield before in terms of crops? The crop yield before, and what is the crop yield right now? And definitely, you will get good answers from our farmers and from our fisher folks. Now, the other two, they are not included in the framework, but for research, we usually use it, all right, so that because we really want to understand the psychological impact, and of course the religious and spiritual assessment of our people. Why psychological assessment? If you ask the psychologist, I'm not really sure if you have a psychologist here. If you ask the psychologist, they do understand what resiliency is all about, or resilience is all about. But they have a specific term for psychological impact assessment. They call it post-traumatic growth, or post-traumatic growers. Now, for example, in 2013, when Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda made its landfall, now um, thousands and thousands of people died. All right. So when we did our FGDs, when we interviewed them, all right, you know what they told us? We found out that they have not experienced that kind of flood. They have not experienced that kind of hazard, because it is considered to be an extreme event. You have a 240 km per hour super typhoon, or Yolanda. So in terms of post-traumatic growth, the level, all right, the post-traumatic growth level of the people who are living in the area of Tacloban is low. So meaning it's not that high, it's not really high. But for those people who have been experiencing different types of hazards, for example, the people who are living in Kamanava area, they have been experiencing floods. I mean, more than 365 in 1/4 days. I mean, they know what they're gonna do. All right. So they are resilient. So which means that if they are resilient, the post-traumatic growth is high. So we call them post-traumatic growers. So that's how we assess, all right, those people using this particular framework. The other one is religiosity and spiritual assessment. We do know that the Filipinos and different parts and a different ASEAN ASEAN member states, I mean foreigners and brothers and sisters in the ASEAN region, we are very religious in nature, and that's the reason why we always want to integrate religiosity and spirituality. Why? Like what I mentioned a while ago, after Yolanda made its landfall, right? Thousands and thousands of people died. When we asked them, you know what they told us? They said, you know what, sir, science was no longer there. Science was no longer there. We followed what the scientists told us. We followed what our administrators told us to do. We went to the evacuation centers. And the reason why we were able to survive, because of our faith. And that's the reason that every time we conduct this particular study, travel to different parts of the Philippines and in Southeast Asia, we always include religiosity, and spirituality. And after that, we will be able to identify the level of adaptive capacity of the people. May they be in the province, city, or municipality. And once we determine the level of adaptive capacity, we provide them the strategies, specifically the CCAD-RRM, climate change adaptation strategies that are pertinent to the society. Next. So this is an example. All right, this is an example, and this is for the agricultural sector. And then definitely it's not enough to understand your track, your risk, and your impact assessment. Now, if you are going to help a certain municipality or province, you have to understand the policy. So the policies and the public acts. So we want to make sure that those programs and projects that are going to be developed and implemented in the province, cities, and municipalities are aligned to the international and national frameworks. They're aligned to the policy and the public acts. They're also aligned to the financial policy framework because we have the People Survival Fund, and that is the Green Climate Fund of the Philippines. And there's also a possibility that we can access the GCF Fund or the Green Climate Fund and their Global Environmental Facility and other multilateral and local programs. So we also want to know if you have your action plans, because we want to make sure that the programs and projects that are going to be implemented are aligned to your National Climate Change Action Plan or your NCCAP or the Local Climate Change Action Plan in your municipality. So if we talk about the local action plans, there are 7 priority areas: your food security, your water sufficiency, sustainable energy, human security, the ecological and environmental stability or biodiversity, your climate smart industries and infrastructure, and the last one in terms of knowledge management and capacity development. So why knowledge management? Because you really want to know the level of your know-how. Because every time you travel to those areas, people will still don't understand what climate change is all about. And in terms of capacity development, since that there is really a problem, that there's really a gap in understanding climate science, understanding climate change, we see to it, all right? We want to make sure that the proper training or proper capacity development is provided to these particular stakeholders. So this is your NCCAP or the National Climate Change Action Plan priority areas. And so how did we apply TRIP? So for the Climate Smart Philippines, how did we do that? For the Mindanao region, we were able to establish an MOA with the Mindanao Development Authority. This is in the promotion and implementation of the food, energy, water Nexus system, and to train all the stakeholders. Please take note, to train all the stakeholders in Mindanao, the national, the local government units, the civil society organizations, the academe, the private sector. So this is Cardinal Quevedo. You're right. He is the president of the Mindanao River Basin Council, president of all river basin councils in Mindanao. And this is Yusek Yayet. She is the executive director of the Mindanao Development Authority. And here in my left, the late Secretary Alonto and his wife, Commissioner Bar Alonto. So we partner with the Mindanao Development Authority because if you really want to make a project in Mindanao, if you want to put up a project, a program, you have to go to Minda because Minda or the Mindanao Development Authority is the one that facilitates all projects that are being implemented in the whole Mindanao. So for the Climate Smart Mindanao, we partner, we capacity and we train the people in Davao. That's Davao City. I'll run this down. And then Sarangani Province, the Chongbians of Sarangani, Sultan Kudarat. So I travel there. I travel in those areas together with my junior research scientists. I have 45 researchers, by the way. Then South Cotabato Province, Tacurong City. Then we also have General Santos, Cagayan de Oro. And just to provide you a very good experience in Mindanao, we created a network. Minda, the ILG of Regional Commission in Higher Education Region, NEDA, the DOST Fisheries, the ECSRI, our institute, the Global Green Growth Institute, the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of the Philippines, and the Harvard Club of the Philippines. And every time that we travel to Visayas and Mindanao, Visayas and Luzon, we provide this kind of good practice, not only the creation of this strong network, all right, to understand what climate change is all about, but of course to make and create sustainable projects that are pertinent to the society, to the province, and to the region. Then we also had Climate Smart Bangsamoro for the BARM government, and everybody is aware about BARM government. It's totally different from Minda. So they have their own ministry, and the lead partner, or the lead agency is MENRE, the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in Mindanao, provincial and local government units, academe, CSOs, and the private sector. So part of my commitment, part of our commitment is to train again all these stakeholders. So for the Visayas, so we did Climate Smart Aklan or Boracay, Climate Smart Leyte, Climate Smart Eastern Samar, Climate Smart Bohol, the Climate Smart Baspada and Luzon, because before the former governor and vice governor are our co-Harvard alumni, so they used to be the governor and the vice governors in that particular province. So we also did Sorsogon during the time of Bobet Rodriguez, Obet, then Climate Smart Aurora province. Then we also went to Batanes for everybody's information. Climate Smart Batanes, Climate Smart Palawan in partnership with the Palawan Council for Sustainable Development. Climate Smart Quirino, the Kuwas of Quirino province. The Climate Smart Benguet and Baguio. Climate Smart Pangasinan. Climate Smart Bataan province. And Climate Smart Quezon, specifically in the areas of Polillo, General Nakar, and Pantareal. So I have a very interesting story about in Polillo Islands. The Polillo Island, before Humalig is part of it, and of all the areas of the Philippines, based on our research, Humalig used to be, used to be the part of Polillo Islands. That is the most vulnerable area or the most vulnerable island in the Philippines. Why? Because it's just a flat island. There's no mountains. If you have a tsunami or a major hazard, then everyone will die. And that's the reason that makes that island very, very, very vulnerable to tsunami or different types of climate hazards. So we also have Climate Smart Tarlac. This is in partnership with the Oscar M. Lopez Center for Climate Change Adaptation, wherein we installed ultrasonic flood detector systems. Then we also have Climate Smart Mindoro, wherein we train the women of Mangyan, because this is in partnership with the National Commission on Indigenous People. Climate Smart Batangas, specifically in Tingloy, San Luis. Climate Smart Batangas in Balayan. And of course, aside from in 2019, so it's not only Climate Smart, because we were asked to consider the geohazards, because Batangas has Taal volcano, and we were asked to do the analysis for the volcanic eruption, and that's the reason for Batangas. It's not just Climate Smart Batangas, but it's called Climate Smart and Disaster Resilient Batangas, another program. So aside from the local government units and the national government agencies, we trained and capacitated farmers and fishermen, indigenous people, in partnership with the National Commission on Indigenous People. Why? Why do we want to why did we partner with indigenous people? So for instance, if you want to put up a project that is actually part of the ancestral domain of a tribe or indigenous people, you cannot just go there and build your own project. So no matter how innovative it is, if there's no participation of the tribe or the indigenous people, it's gonna be rejected by the people or the indigenous people in those particular areas. You will be needing your FPIC or the free prior informed consent and participation of all these stakeholders in order for you to move forward with the project. And that's the reason why we partner with NCIP and with the IPs. So we also partner with different academic institutions, universities, and colleges. This particular picture is in partnership with Development Academy of the Philippines, and part of our partnership with them is we don't want our employees to be employees forever. So part of our training, part of our partnership, specifically for capacity development training, is to provide diploma leading to a master's degree, so that even our people at the the employees in the local government unit, LGU, will have the chance to, well, to to assume a higher office. We don't want them to be employees forever, and that's the reason why we're offering this kind of service in partnership with the Development Academy of the Philippines. Then in the private sector, so with Sir Hang C of SM, with the Double Chamber of Commerce and the different private sectors, other partners, the U.S. Department of State, because I'm part of the U.S. ASEAN mission, U.S. ASEAN Fellows for Science and Technology. So I'm an awardee, an honoree of the U.S. government. So part of my commitment is to bring peace, resilient, and of course sustainable projects, not only in the Philippines but of course in Southeast Asia. Of course, with the help of USAID. Harvard Kennedy School alumni. Renzo is also part of the Harvard Club of the Philippines. So with the help of the Harvard Kennedy School, so I was able to promote Climate Smart Philippines. Then Harvard, of course, this Harvard Kennedy School alumni together with the UP Board of Regent, Gigil Jimenez, is part of our group. So Department of Environment and Natural Resources with Annalisa, USEC Annalisa Te and Secretary Simato, and of course USEC Garcia. DA, he's a father to me, Secretary William Barr. Of course, Ria Prasad from NASA, a climate scientist from National Aeronautics Space Administration, because we use the different data or information from NASA, specifically for rainfall and temperature projections. So this is Richard Hirsch from the former chief of party or program manager of USAID. This one is Arnel Casanova. He is working. He's the country director or country representative of AECOM. He's my cousin. This is, of course, this famous Quintin Pastrana of Bloomberg and CNN Anchor. So that's what we do, all right? In order to reach out to more people, all right, in order to move forward this particular program, the Climate Smart Philippines, the tip is you have to partner and you have to collaborate with different stakeholders. You really have to win their hearts. So if you cannot do that, then there's no way for you to make a project at Arsan City, and there's no way for you to train and capacitate different stakeholders. So from 2010 up to the present, so I was able to implement these particular projects. There are 84 projects in the Philippines, 7 projects in the pipeline, and these are energy projects. And there are 22 projects in the ASEAN region, in Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines, and Vietnam. Now, in terms of capacity development and training, I was able to train and educate and capacitate more than 700 agencies and local government units in the country, more than 300 academic colleges and universities, more than 300 groups of private sector, and more than 300 groups, not individuals, groups of civil society organizations, NGOs, communities of farmers, fishermen, indigenous people, women, youth, church leaders, and PWDs, or the persons with disabilities. Approximately around 40 million people in the country. So what is it really? What is Climate Smart Philippines all about? So every time they ask me about Climate Smart Philippines, like what I mentioned a while ago, it is actually it's more than a program. Yes, it is a project, but it is more than a program. The point here is to bring people all together, to be trained, and of course, not only to be trained, but of course to, excuse me, not only to be trained, but of course to get inspired on how they're going to serve our country wholeheartedly. So that ends my presentation, and thank you very much for listening. I'm really very sorry because this is my 7th meeting. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sir Glenn, for that sharing, for making us understand that if we want to know the adaptive capacity, we have to also consider not also biophysical, socioeconomic, but also psychological and religiosity and spirituality. And thank you for the work that you do for on climate change. Okay, so now we have questions for the panelists. Please feel free also to type more questions. So are the panelists ready for the questions? This one is directed, the first question is directed for Dr. Renzo. So sabi niya, those who are in the poultry and other meat production industries will be displaced if we push for the lesser meat consumption. Could there be alternatives for this one?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much to the one who asked that question. And by the way, it's a pleasure to listen to Glenn, a good friend and again a colleague. Um, regarding the meat industry, I mean that's not a unique question for the meat industry. If we really want to decarbonize the world, there will be some sectors that will need to be made, you know, that will need to be reduced, if not to be made obsolete. Okay, I'm not saying that the meat industry will need to be obsolete. Remember, in the planetary health diet, there's still a small portion for red meat. So we're not saying that we need to totally eliminate it, but we need to dramatically reduce, our consumption. And also, by the way, another caveat, that is a global plate. And actually, we're interested to study how can we Philippinize it, because maybe for the Filipino plate, it will not be, that exact, the proportions will not be the same as the global, because there are parts of the world that will really need to cut down their meat consumption. For example, the high income countries. But there are also countries that are not even eating meat at all. And they actually are the ones who need to have some protein sources. For instance, India is a vegetarian country at large. And so, you cannot blame India, for instance, for emitting a lot of carbon from the food sector because they're not eating meat, on a grand scale. Having said that, yes, there will be sectors that will need to be, that will need to reduce their activity, that will be even displaced. That's the term. And what are the alternatives? Of course, there we need to think of other, crops, for example, to promote, and other sources of food. Uh, and it's not just about moving them from one sector to another. It's also building their skills and capacities, right? When we want, if we want green jobs, then there should be green skills, and if there should be green skills, then we need a green education. But is the educational system preparing us for that? And of course, there has to be a concomitant response from, again, the industry. So who are these players that are already investing in not just green food but green technologies? So that's a big question. I'm basically giving more of the principles, but in terms of which new industries, I think that is an area for innovation. For example, one emergent technology is coming up with plant-based meat products, or even laboratory produced meat. Of course, there might be some health risks as well. At the end of the day, any product will have health benefits but also health risks. So these need to be studied continuously. But innovation, I think, is one answer, so that we can find those new sectors where these people will be moved towards. I'll stop there.
Okay, so as a follow-up, somebody stated about organic agricultural program of the DA. Can this contribute to planetary health, and can this also be an alternative?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we know when it's organic, meaning we're not using artificial chemicals. And I just described to you a while ago that one of the boundaries that are already violated is the boundary of nitrogen and phosphorus. So if we cut down our use of artificial fertilizers, we will prevent that from worsening. Hopefully, we will even heal the planet. So, we've already violated it. Remember, our challenge is to reverse it. And that is a big scientific question. Same question that we should be asking for climate change. What if we breach the 2 degrees Celsius limit of the Paris Agreement? Can that be reversed? but while we're not there yet, I think we need to adopt a preventative approach, right? We have to make sure we don't reach that limit. So yes, organic. Of course, the challenge is how to support our farmers to actually adopt those natural organic practices, because there's this, I mean, both the economics but also the perception is telling us that organic is more expensive. And so we need to address that question. And part of it, we provide support to farmers. And part of it, we need to increase the demand, because that is what the law of economics would tell us. You increase the demand, producers will respond, and prices will go down.
Thank you, Dr. Renzo. Okay, so another one here is for both speakers. It's from Adrian Arcilio. So based from your areas of practice, how do you define sustainable agriculture and food system? Sir Glenn, please answer first.
All right. Thank you very much for that question. Well, if you talk about sustainable agriculture or smart agriculture, you want to make sure that you are reducing your GHGs, all right? You are using your greenhouse gases in the form of carbon dioxide equivalents. So there are ways. Now, in 2011, we did a study on low carbon diet, all right? Application of low carbon diet for the agricultural sector. So that's wherein we identify, for example, the different sources of carbon dioxide equivalents for example, if it's related to planetary health. The animals, all right, that feed to plants, your cows, your what else? Your cows, your horse. We're able to identify and we're able to calculate all of it. And that's only one of the sources of agriculture. Another thing is you have to what? You also have to consider uh, different type of sources and how are you going to make it sustainable. So in terms of resilience and sustainability, please take note of a sustainable project or resilient project. Consider, for instance, what is this project? The rainwater harvesting system for the agricultural sector. Why? Simply because that, for instance, if you don't have any specific project that will address the drought in one particular area, so what is the best technology? What is the most innovative way to address drought or to address increasing temperature? And again, one of the usual examples that I always provide every time we do the rollout is the rainwater harvesting system. It has to be integrated because, for instance, in Tingloy, that's one of our recommendations when we did the analysis. Because in Tingloy, you have the upland, and you also have people who are living in the coastal areas. So two problems in the coastal area, they have been experiencing saltwater intrusion, like what Renzo discussed a while ago, the saltwater intrusion. But the problem in the upland, since it is upland, there is a problem in water supply. So what is the best technology so that you will be able to come up with a resilient and sustainable project? So it's not just a rainwater harvesting system, it's an integrated water harvesting system wherein you have to treat the water that will be supplied to the upland. And at the same time, we're also going to treat it in such a way that it will be good for drinking for those people who are in the coastal areas. So it's resilient. Why is it resilient? Simply because that you're not going to make an infrastructure that will just last for 5 years. Resilient meaning in that particular infrastructure, make sure that it can stand more than 300 kilometer per hour per typhoon. So, ibig sabihin, kapag masyadong mataas yung bagyo, hindi siya basta-basta masisira. And that makes your project resilient. Okay, and that's again an innovative solution, not only for our farmers, but of course for our fisher folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
just to add to what Glenn, and I definitely agree with everything that he said, and I Glenn, I actually love the climate smart concept. Actually, my doctoral dissertation is about climate smart health system. So, I think the concept of climate smart, you can use it in agriculture, you can use it in climate smart cities. You can also use it as a framework for the future of your health system, because we want the health system to be both adaptive to climate change, but also to be low carbon. We don't want to be part of the crime, right? And the future food system and agricultural system should be climate smart, as described by Glenn. What is missing there, or what needs to be added or highlighted, we need to make sure that the food system produces nutritious food to people. Because it can be, and maybe, when we say climate smart agricultural system, maybe that's a given, but maybe it's not, right? Because agricultural policies may not necessarily be driven by what's nutritious for people. It's driven by what will produce volumes so that our economy will be kept afloat, right? But if nutrition, well-being of people is front and center, then that opens up another question. What are the crops that are resilient to climate change, that are low carbon, but will also make sure children are neither obese nor underweight, right? That is quite a very challenging question, and definitely there's room for research and innovation.
Thank you again for that, Dr. Renzo. And yes, me being in Benguet, I've seen a lot of oversupply of crops, but these are done through commercial means, a lot of fertilizers and pesticides. But anyway, okay, let's move to another question, which is important. It's about data. So, because data is crucial in many decision making, according to the one who asked the question, but it's still scarce in the Philippines. So, how do you see this problem being resolved in terms of for food security?
Yeah, we have. So actually, that's what we provide. The kind of we provide to LGUs. So before, Pag-asa has those data. It's only one of the research institutions. Manila Observatory has. Our institution also provides the data, and those kinds of data is specific for rainfall and temperature, and it's for free. All right, you're not going to pay for this data. It has to be, open data, meaning everyone can access on it. And every time that we provide that kind of training, it's not just about the data, but the training on what is going to happen in your area. So in my presentation, when I mentioned track assessment, we use climate data. These particular climate data are from the different sources accredited by the IPCC, by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. All right. So data from NASA, from CSIRO of Australia, from US NOAA. So that's what we use. And we use them to help our local government units and of course our partners to understand what's going to happen in the future. So you might think, oh, Sir Glenn, it's only for you guys, for climate scientists. No, because even the indigenous people, I taught them, we educated them on how to use this data to analyze what is going to happen in that particular in their own province or in their own island. And like what I said, they are available. You can use it. All right, they're on. You just have to Google where you're going to get this data, and you just have to what? You just have to know what you really need, because uh, there's there are so many data, there's so many information, and then you don't know. Oh my God, I don't need this anymore. You just have to identify what you need in your study. Are you going to need this data for your project? Are you going to need it for the development of your program? You just have to know what these data are. Thank you.
And in addition to what Glenn mentioned about data, when we hear the word data, we always think of big data, but we tend to ignore the data that is within our reach, the data that comes from our locale, from our own communities and people. Data is also not only quantitative, there's qualitative data, but also there's tacit knowledge of the people, right? So, there's so much data, we just, don't seek for the data, right? I think I like what Glenn said. Yes, we know where the data is, but we need to also build the capacity of the decision makers, of the communities in both the generation and consumption of data. So there's so much that needs to be done, right? If we want our policies, our solutions, even at the local level, to be data driven. And there's so much data. I think we just need to seek for them and use them.
Thank you, Sir Renzo. Okay, so there's one question about monitoring projects to ensure that they're sustained by various communities. This is directed to Sir Glenn, but Sir Renzo can also answer.
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, it's fine. There's no problem about it. Sorry. Um, sorry, what's that again, Emma?
Is there any
Still,
strategy on
yeah,
how
monitoring, right?
monitor
Monitoring,
the
right?
projects?
Yeah. Uh, First, this is also again what we provide. The M&E, we call it the M&E system, or the monitoring and evaluation system. So in one particular institution, it is very much important to know or to integrate or to include that in your system. How you monitor and evaluate your projects. If you think that a particular project is not feasible, then you have to change it. Now, in the project development and implementation, like what I mentioned, because we are traveling, diba? We have been traveling different parts of the country. Now, you're not going to give us one project alone that's going to be implemented. Three adaptation projects that you think are important to your community or to your municipality. So if you think that the first one is not applicable, then you move on to the second one. So how do we apply the M&E system? First, you have to train all the stakeholders in your area. So you may be the LGU, but you will be needing the help of the academe. You will be needing the help of the scientists in those areas. And that's the reason why I kept on mentioning you have to train the stakeholders. And in the project implementation, it has to be done in transdisciplinary way, transdisciplinary mode, or transdisciplinary approach, wherein, of course, the LGU will implement what we recommend, but then again, you will be needing scientists in the area. And how do we do that? We train the university in that particular province, because like what I said, I cannot travel there. I cannot travel most of the time, especially now. And that's how we build capacity. You have to train the universities, you have to train those academic officials so that they will be the one to help their own community, specific for project development and project development and implementation. That's one. Another one is uh, you're also going to include the civil society organization in the province. So you just have to what you just have to identify who these CSOs are. You just have to identify who these people's organization of farmers, fisher folks, and indigenous people, because they will be the one to organize talks, organize um, meetings, if specifically if there is a project that will be implemented in the area. So that's the role of your CSO. Another one is, of course, the youth. You have to engage the youth. They're very, very active. So especially, if there is a climate change adaptation project again that will be implemented, engage them. I'm pretty much sure that they have bright ideas that can be contribute that can contribute for the success of the project. And then once all these sectors, stakeholders are trained and capacitated, you have to come up with a sustainability exit plan. You're not gonna go there to train alone. Of course, you're not gonna go there forever. You're not gonna stay there forever. Part of the commitment is to let them understand that they have the value to solve the problem, and they have the value to be part of the solution. So and like what I said, I always tell them, never ever think that you are just a farmer. Never ever think that you belong to the grassroots level. Never ever think about it. Always think that what you can provide, that in solving climate change, all of us have the commitment to do it. So it's not just the role of the LGU that will implement the project, but it is everybody's concern. It is everybody's commitment to be part of the solution to make this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Glenn. And since you talked about training the youth and training supporting the academe and those things, a lot of our participants here from the academe, and so they are asking if who can they contact if they need you to speak or help them with trainings, and please give information on that one.
Uh, Renzo and I are going to provide that kind of training. The two of us are free because, like what I said, in all those capacity development, they're all for free. They're all pro bono. I give it for free. So, so if you are thinking that, oh my God, they must be very expensive. No, no, this is really part of my advocacy. All right, it's really part of my advocacy, and I'm pretty much sure that Renzo this is also part of his advocacy, because it's like what I said. Um, uh, I call it I call that particular project. It's more than a program. It's more than a project. It's really about your commitment to serve humanity, to serve your country. And it can only be done if all of us are going to be educated, if all of us are going to be trained and capacitated. Um, yung iba kasi, probably yung iba kasi it's they have their own way to do it. But in my case, I see to it that all of you are going to learn once I open my mouth and begin to teach everyone. Thank you.
Yep. And if you want to reach out to us, follow us on Twitter, on at least me. I don't know if Glenn has Twitter. But follow me on Twitter, Renzo Ginto. Add me on LinkedIn, Renzo Ginto. Let's start a conversation there.
There po, I hope your questions are answered. Dr. Renzo and Sir Glenn are very easy to talk to. When I messaged them, they responded immediately. So it's really not difficult, even if I know they're very busy. Also, if you need to or you want to set up Zero Hunger Labs in your localities, you can also contact us and we can do some sessions or we can plan some sessions with you to provide also to students or or to farmers or any group you want. So there. So I know we want to know more, but then it's already late and we took a lot of their time already, Dr. Renzo and Sir Glenn. So thank you so much for giving this opportunity. We really learned a lot. And so for the participants, we are going to post the evaluation link here and please answer so we can give you your certificate. All the other questions po, you can still send us and then we will be collating them and we will be letting Sir Glenn and Dr. Renzo answer and we'll be emailing them to you. Okay, so thank you again for joining us for tonight. We have other sessions next Thursday, so visit our page, Zero Hunger Lab, on Facebook to be updated on the schedules and the topics and the next topics. So have a very good night and thank you.